Hey guys, Thomas the Genie here, aka Mustached Tom, here to review the movie The Menu. If you end up enjoying this full movie review, then please feel free to like, comment, and subscribe. Also make sure to check out those links in the description. One will head you over to my petition to help out small YouTubers. Second and third to my Patreon and PayPal, where you can help support me and my channel directly. And fourth to my Discord server, where you can join, collab, and share your own content there for free. And chilling will be reminded there at the end of the review. With all that out of the way, let's get into the menu. So, in preparation for this, I've seen the trailer for the menu a few times. I want to say 2 or 3 before seeing the movie. And I did the stupid thing where I saw other people's reviews, because it usually that can easily tilt my perspective in one way or the other, and I try to be objectively, my whole thing is to maintain a level of being as objective as possible. With all that out of the way, let's get into it. So, the movie starts off with a young woman who's being escorted by a young-ish man named Taylor. Her name is Margot. She is our lead character to whom we are following. And the preparation here is that he is taking her to some luxurious food date, and is trying to get her to stop smoking to make sure that her palate is up for the menu to, let it sink in, as it were. And thus we, in this little introduction, in this pier, meet the remainder of our high-class sophisticados to indulge our little trip. We have these 2 critics, these older critics of general food critics in general. We have this actor who, or ex-actor I suppose, who is transitioning into production design. And this trio who are invested in this restaurant in one way or another. And they all are, as we'll learn a little bit more about each little group here. So, as we are taking this tour with this crew, we see them on the boat fairly briefly. Once they reach their destination, we see them being tour guided, and this woman, the chef, I guess second-in-command chef is what I'll refer to her as, because I don't remember her character's name off the top of my head. So the second chef essentially tour guides them and tells them that if they cook this particular meal wrong, that it could lead to death. Which kind of is like the first, interesting. As our tour guide continues, we make sure to pan over to see the chef's house. Taylor's really invested in checking it out, but we are told it is off limits. So we see that we notice that the main chef, whose name I actually did manage to get, but earlier in my notes I didn't quite get it quite yet, but we'll get there. Seems to be eyeing Margot for some particular reason, and we'll learn as to why that is pretty briefly. And as the first course is served, it shows the ingredients of what is being served on the screen, so it's like treating it like a like a cooking show within the movie, I guess is the best way I can explain it. And as he is preparing the food to head out, he is, throughout the movie, he is telling these individuals who are partaking these little stories throughout. And after his first explanation, he says to not just eat, to savor, to enjoy the meal, enjoy the experience. And I do feel like this is gonna come back to bite the movie a little bit later on. So anyways, as we are sort of surveying our several groups, we see that Damien is trying to pitch in a new show where he's like this restaurant partaking person, like a foodie, I guess is what they refer to these as. And after their first course, which was like this unique, like, sea thing, is like the theme of what that was. The second course is a serving of non-bread, is like the substances that like make up like what you would put on bread, but not bread. This begins to frustrate some of the guests, particularly the Triangle Trad group there. The trio is not happy about this, and they request actual bread, but they get told no. This is sort of like a direct opposition to sort of, I guess, the customer is always right. Like, you always do what the customer says. It's sort of like, as someone who's worked in customer service, as someone who's done it, that's something you are told, right? It's, you know, the customer is always right, essentially. It's sort of like the vibe this little part is going for. And this is where our second chef in command whispers to one of the trio, saying that you will eat less than what you deserve. And I think I'm paraphrasing a little bit there, but she essentially says something to that effect. In the process of their meal, Tyler gets upset by something, and he spills some glass. And this is when everyone kind of stops and looks over at them briefly, and then kind of goes back to what they were doing, and things get cleaned up. But the chef also notices at this point that Margot hasn't partaken in too much of these meals, as it were. This is where we learn or see some of the other compatriots here. There's this older couple who have been married for a long time who I think they were already there, and the mother character who was already there, I think. I don't remember if the older couple was there or not. Regardless, it doesn't really change anything, but so this is about the time after the bread that Julian goes over, that's the main chef's name, by the way, Julian, goes over the main third course, and it's this story about how he ended up stabbing his dad in the knee out of self-defense. And each meal comes with that on the quote-unquote steak, as well as a little cute, like, fake or real scissor thing on the tray, and these, I believe they were tortillas, that were memories, are, baked into them were these memories of each group, and this is where the group consensus becomes a lot more alarming. The trio is revealed to be these embezzlers. The old couple, the man of the two, the male, is cheating on our main character. You had Tyler, who was taking these photographs without any, even though he was explicitly told not to. We had the I forget what was on the actor's thing, or the ex-actor, I should keep saying. But point being is that each group had their own personalized one. This is where Tyler starts to notice that Margot is not ideal, I suppose, and starts to reveal how much of an asshole he truly is to Margot. I mean, before then, it seems like he was just trying to, like, get her to quit smoking to, like, enjoy the food, which I guess is fine-ish. I don't know. I don't know how I would take that one, but beforehand, it didn't really come off as anything other than just like, well, we're going to enjoy this meal, but now all of a sudden, Tyler seems to, again, snap at her in a very aggressive way that was not present beforehand. So, the fourth meal, the fourth dish is on, and Julian brings out one of his various chefs in the kitchen, named Jeremy, and the whole shtick of this is that Jeremy was idealizing himself to be the main chef, to live his life, to sort of take that spot, take that mantle, and the main chef is like, you will never, ever reach that spot. You'll never accomplish what I have accomplished. You will always be nothing, essentially. Jeremy then persists to take out a gun and kill himself. If the tortillas weren't enough to gain everyone's suspicious levels high, this absolutely seals the deal. But not really, because they managed to simultaneously convince themselves while also kind of being convinced by them, or Julian, is that this is all a part of the menu, as he keeps calling the title, literally calling it as the title throughout the movie. That everything that is happening for tonight is for this purpose, for this thing. And this includes Margot herself in that category of people, despite her sticking out much to Julian's digression throughout the movie. So it seems that, and he keeps we'll get to more of this. And so they managed to do that to get the people to return, only to cut off one of the people's hand or fingers off, and they don't immediately go double down on trying to get out of the situation. It's like, what the fuck? And it is this level of suspension of disbelief that starts to I don't know if people would just keep going is this part of the show? I feel like after 2 incidences, that's already two steps of especially with the gun one, that would be that's a red flag of no, you should probably try to investigate a lot better than just kind of going, it's part of the show, But among everyone who's freaking out, there does seem to be at least one person who is not fazed whatsoever by anything that is happening, which is Tyler, who just keeps managing to eat what is put in front of him. He's just enjoying the meals as if this is all just perfectly handy-dandy, neato burrito. And this is the first many of times that Margot is pulled aside to the kitchen, where this is where he says that you don't belong here. And that they, the group of people over there, they will all die. And that was the point of all of this, is to kill all of them. And, in fact, even though all of themselves throughout this process of the menu, as this final retaliation, this giving up moment. Despite that, he says that she could either choose to be among them, meaning the takers, as he refers to them, or the givers, the chefs. So, I thought I would do a break away from this, and I'll do this one time later in the review, to compare this to YouTube, because I feel like there are a lot of similarities here between the givers and the takers, if you will, that sort of simulation. So, in this context, technically speaking, I am the giver. I am giving you this content, as it were. For example, I'm making this review, and I'm giving it to YouTube to give to you, and now you are taking it and absorbing all of this information in. And you, by all right, have the right to critique it, and that only takes you, like me, depending on how well you are able to articulate, a certain period of time. Despite, being able to do, among other things, and such. So that's sort of like how I would compare this to YouTube, in a way, to make it fit. And I do think that there is another moment that definitely fits this bill to YouTube, and I'll mention that when it pops up. So she's given some time to think it over, 15 minutes to be exact. So, this is where desperation starts to slink in to our little groups, other than our protagonist, who seems to be in a whole another situation all her own. Excuse me. Damien, the ex-actor, joins the trio of the trio who invested poorly into this area. I'll just refer to them as, I guess. This is where one of them, this guy in yellow, who seems to be pretty desperate throughout the movie, which is pretty important to keep in mind, because later on in the movie we see him just do something completely, I feel, is out of character for him specifically, but we see consistently he's the most willing to try things that are trying to get him out of the situation. The first is, albeit extremely stupid, as he tries to get off of his chair, pull it up, and attempt to break the window, which it's discovered that's one of those, harder, plain, reinforced glass windows, so it doesn't even make a dent, essentially. Which, being that this was a rich place, kind of, but I do get it. He was in a, the rest can make you start to do crazier things, I suppose, so I do, it's a little justified in a way. And at least he tried something, which is going to come up again, and then not again later on in the film, which makes this character inconsistent as far as I'm concerned. All the while, uh, we notice that Julian starts to focus in, hone in his words to the critics and how they went about critiquing all other food restaurants around the world or whatever. They shut other places down. Now, this is where I'll say food critique is different significantly from YouTube critique. At least from the lack of understanding that I have of food critique, because obviously I'm not of that world. I would obviously make enough separation, obviously, because one is very much more in favor of individualized taste buds, because each taste bud is different, and a collective versus a collective group of ideas, concepts, and writing, and, directing, and storytelling, and characters is a whole nother can of worms that can be picked apart very, very differently from, say, again, eating, which is, again, a far more subjective thing in its nature. And when I think of that, ideally, what the ideal food critic would be someone with a very open, taste palette, as it were. Someone who's able to get a little bit unique in what they are, willing to try. And as far as I know, at least, again, from earlier examples, it seems to be like food critics also double serve as sort of the OSHA of food in a way, where they're like looking out to see if their actual restaurant is in it itself is enough to warrant it staying up, like making sure there are no like diseases or like things of that nature, making sure the food is at least edible and not, gonna make you sick or something along those lines. So there's a health concern with being a food critic. That is that is from my understanding of being a food critic. I could, be wrong in a ways, I suppose, when it comes to the way food critics write. That could be a completely different thing. Anyway, and that also reminded me of Ratatouille, because obviously Ratatouille is about the food critic and the whole, that whole shtick. So, I'm sure someone else will mention it, so I figure, might as well. So we kind of go over the old couple who have been there 11 times prior, and how they have sort of just been coasting through this daily or routinely thing, only to see the third thing that should have, if the dead body weren't enough, they do another one where they have now hoisted up outside the building, the quote-unquote true owner of the building, because the chef, had it, I guess it's like a loan process, or however it technically works, outside of it with angel wings, and they lower him into the water and just simply drown him. And of course, this causes the group more concern, as they consistently are not sure how to even persist in trying to escape. And, the desperation seems to be very thin, besides that one attempt that failed. So that is going to persist to be an issue. But this is where Margot is pulled aside yet again. This is where she's, told, hey, your time is running out, you gotta make your choice, and I think you are with us, is sort of what Julian's starting to put together here. But it's time for the next little activity. This is where our group gets their biggest attempt at a break yet, as They are led outside, and they are told that they have time to escape. This is where the same guy in yellow we saw try to break the window, as soon as he even begins to utter that phrase, he runs off. So he has a head start of everyone else. Keep that in mind. Now, I don't know how big this island is, so that is obviously the thing I cannot determine in defense or critique of the movie, so I'm just going to point that out. But just keep in mind that he does technically have a head start. Now, with that being said, everyone else starts running out, except for the women, because this stuff is all about man. Man's Folly, I believe, is the name of the course. And Catherine is their next, among the females now, their next server. This is where we learned that this was her idea, apparently. And they're trying to convince her, at this time, that, that this isn't the way, even though she drops that bombshell. And, I can't help but think of how stupid this is. When all of the chefs are outside, she's the only one inside. They have access to the kitchen currently, and none of them, not even Margot, thinks for a second, let's grab some of their knives and potentially defend ourselves with some weapons. That's a crazy thought, since none of them are currently here, but none of them think to do that. Why? I don't know. They were seemingly more and more desperate before, but here we are with a chance, and Margot definitely stands out among these particular set of women to try that, but not even she attempts to do that. So, suspension of disbelief goes down yet again. I don't believe that none of them would try to, at least try to do that. So, among their chase, we see that the man, the one in the yellow, got all the way to the shoreline, to the boat specifically, and they managed to actually catch up to him, meaning, like, these guys must be on leg day or some shit, because my god. You know? And the last guy caught, technically speaking, was, like, in the coop house of this chicken area, so he was given some sort of mini prize, even though we all already know by this point that they are all going to die. We know this already, that much already. We were told this by Julian himself. So, this is where they're given their 6th course. And this is where they make it explicit, if it wasn't already evident from beforehand, that everyone here will die. And Margot is, you know, already kind of in that knowledge, so she's not so surprised by this, but goes to Taylor, and Julian exposes that Taylor knew all along that this was the case. He pre-signed up knowing that this was going to be the price, that everyone was going to die. So she was already upset with him, and then she persists to slap him, which is completely justified. But this is where we get switched on, where Taylor is the one forced into the kitchen to prepare a meal. Now, this is where I think the movie gets a little bit confused, I think I'm getting confused on what the movie is trying to do here specifically. So Taylor was someone who was overly so enthusiastic about the food. He was enjoying the food. And yet, he is the one who's pulled up and forced to make the food. Now, my first inclination was that something like this was going to happen anyways, but it was going to be towards the critics. And why do I suggest that? Well, the reason I suggest that is that there is an air of it that would seem to be, that would make logical sense to me at least, or even through a thematic lens of making sense, of this idea of the over-critical nature of things. As a critic myself, I suggest this, of, someone who does the uber nitpicks, goes over the hedge, as you were. And this isn't the person that is picked, which is baffling to put on display, as to be like, well, if, to go back to the YouTube thing, this is where I'm going to do my second YouTube shift, because I used to see this in comments way back when. Not on my own videos, because my videos never receive comments, because nobody watches my videos for that long and actually comments on what I have to say. But, woe is me aside, but I have received comments, and I do try to, actually, I do read them, by the way, and I do respond when I can, so, I make myself different from most YouTubers in that regard, so there's that. So, anyways, way back when, just a subjective little slice of life story from me to you, who may have made it this far, maybe not. In these videos, a person who would critique a film would, go about their review and whatnot, and at some point, someone in the comments would usually say, oh yeah, if you think you could do it, why don't you try making a movie yourself or a video game yourself? And I would see this happen regularly with larger content creators, usually speaking. And it's funny, as a smaller creator, my instinct, while never responding to these people, if I were to ever receive a comment, would have been to be like, say, well, and to respond, well, if I had the money, I would try. I would try to make a film. Like, I want to make a movie, like, legit. I have a lot to say in review form. I have movies I want to make. Trust me. I am right there. I can't afford to make the movie I want to make. Trust me when I say, the movie I would want to make would be bigger than the Avengers. Bigger than the Avengers in terms of sheer number of people in that movie. Because I would want to make a movie based off of a book I wrote, Syndicate X, which has more members in it than who is present in the Avengers movie. And I want everyone who is represented in Syndicate X to be in the movie. That is a large demand. And it could be larger, because I was thinking to myself, would I want it to be live action or animated? I think I would prefer animated at this point, which would be a higher demand, and I'm not an animator myself, so I can't do that part of it, obviously. But I have the story. It's done. I published it. It's done. I don't have the money to hire an animator. I don't have the money to get, if I were to say animate it, to find the voice actors, to do all the other stuff, to get it in the theaters. Believe it or not, that costs money too. So to the people who would say this, I'd be like, yeah, I would try. Do you know how much money it costs to even make a movie? Like, trust me, as a critic, I'm that guy. I know. I want to make a movie. So let me be the first to actually say the thing that these bigger YouTubers have never said in the past. If they haven't, maybe they have. I don't know. I didn't pay attention to if they responded to it. But it's fucking expensive. So it comes across as bizarre when the person who is pulled aside is not only a fan of the thing, but is a overjoyed fan. Perhaps someone who wants to be a part of it almost intrinsically so. And even so, when he's pulled up there, he's like, no, like he's trying to back himself down, whereas, like, the critic would try to be like, this is beneath me, they would scoff it and not play it off as like, oh, geez, I never even claimed to be good at this in the first place, which is true of Tyler's character. So again, I'm not sure what the movie was even trying to say here, that the givers should take to the people who actually enjoy their content and force them to try it too? What? What does that even mean? I'm sorry, but this movie kind of lost me here. But suffice it to say, the thing that he makes comes out pretty garbage. And in fact, when it shows the ingredients, it explicitly says, and it's called Tyler's Bullshit. And Julian tries it, and he was even mocking him throughout, saying, oh, we never even thought of this. And it's like, what is the movie even doing at this point? I don't understand. And then he eats it and he says it's bad. And then he whispers something into his ear. It must have been something really crucial, because boy oh boy, he goes into the back room, and then what we see is like, he must have said something really crazy, because the next time we see him and Margot is told to fetch a barrel, because she's being a part of the chef crew now, she looks over and she sees that Tyler hung himself. It's like, so what the fuck was whispered to him? It would have been like, what? What did he even say? It's like, that part is like, you must have said like the cruelest, most demeaning possible conceived thing, potential. I don't even, like, man. And it's whispered, so it's like, well, it's left to the imagination, I guess. Which I'm not even saying is a critique in it of itself. It's interesting, but the setup is what's baffling. The payoff is interesting. It's like, what the fuck was this moment? It's so weird. Anyway, so Damien steps up again, and he's trying to, like, word his way out of the situation, but he can't seem to quite get there. He's trying to persist of why he is even a part of this crew. He seems to be the most out of the groups, right? Because, like, we have the critics, which fits. We have the Uber fan, which was in this kerfuffle, which, okay. We have the group that has been eating there for, like, a long time. We have the embezzlers who were invested in this store, but we have this movie star, who's just been roped into this, and he's, like, wondering, like, why am I here? Why am I gonna die? Because they all know they're gonna die at this point. So he's, like, trying to figure it out, like, why me specifically? And Julian says that he had a day off, and that he was haunted by one of Julian's weaker performances, and that one thing is, like, what led you to, be like, no, you're gonna be here and you're gonna kill yourself now, or I'm gonna kill you, or whatever. So yeah, I think this is supposed to be a reference to sort of like the fan, in a way, coming up to, the whole death threats in real life that we've seen or been told about anyways. I'm sure this is like a reference to that, like in movies. I'm sure that's a reference to this, which is why this is in the movie. I think is the only reason I can explain it. Not sure what that has to do with food, but I guess it's, it involves criticizing, I guess, to a degree. So Margot is outside. She kind of works her way to the barrel, which has a knife conveniently on top of it, so she grabs the knife instead. But she's being watched from the distance. And the second-in-command chef notices her and tries to stop her, in which Margot proceeds to defend herself in killing the second-in-command in the process of defending herself. However, the second opportunity, where she has the knife still, she has the knife on her, but she leaves it on the goddamn floor. No! Movie. Please, stop. It's so hurtful. You treat me just so painfully. It's like, why? Why do you do it again? This is the second time where I'm like, Margot, what are you doing? You are the outsider. You're supposed to be the last girl. What are you doing? Take the knife. It's like closing in on the third act. What are we doing here? But she does make one good concession. She does at least find the radio and make contact. Fine. So she does make one stupid decision made by one smart decision-ish. But it does backfire, and we'll get there. So, the group is awaiting, and Margot returns with the barrel in tow. And we learned that she called the boat over. So, this is where Julian says to play along, and he says that you could have tried. And this is where, again, I find it, like, this is like the movie, like, self-shielding itself at this point. It's like, he says, like, you could have tried harder to get out, but you never did. I'm like, yeah, that's true. I didn't. I try harder. Doesn't really make sense, does it? And so the police, or a police officer, quote unquote, shows up. And, his name is Dale. And Dale comes up with the gun and is doing the whole routine of, like, what's going on here? And Damien tries to do the whole, like, secret help us thing, and then we see him turn the gun towards Julian, but then start to shift his gun towards what seems to be towards Margot, only for an instant, but toward a light, and show that it is one of those guns that simply turns, like, produces a little bit of flame, and that's it. That's all the gun really does. So it turns out that this particular policeman was in on it too, and he proceeds to join the rest of the crew. However, as that little show ends, we've seen throughout the movie that Julian, whenever he produces a meal, or a course as it's called, he claps his hands, forcing everyone's attention to look at him. This is where Margot returns and retorts, doing her own clap to get everyone's attention. And this is where she claims that, I don't like you, or the food, and I'd like to send it back. And this just baffles Julian to the absolute core. And so she says, she goes on a bit of a monologue here where she goes on about how you've been making this non-food all the night. What the hell has, and she's finally stepping up. So he's like, no, I can do it. I can show you that I still have it, so I can do whatever you want. So she requests a cheeseburger. Now, beforehand, I would have said, if you go into this movie feeling hungry, then boy, oh boy, do I feel bad for you. I did it feeling hungry, by the way. That was my mistake. Because all the meals prior have been barely that, if anything, as I've been suggesting throughout. Like the non-bread bread, as it were, and the tortillas that were just like these stale, thin, like, they almost looked like pancakes almost, with how flat they became. And, just barely anything of food or substance. So she requests a real-ass cheeseburger. Like, just, full throttle. And the reason why, mind you, that she gets to ask for a cheeseburger specifically was because beyond asking for the radio, she does her second smart thing besides doing the other stupid thing when not taking the knife, but she does a secondary smart thing in noticing that there's this one picture in the entire room that has him in his earliest achievement, his earliest award, like me when I first hit 100 subscribers and being genuinely happy, like that sort of experience, of winning his first award after making some sort of cheeseburger. So she's making a direct reference to that and saying, could I have that thing that you made that time ago that you were really happy making, please? So, and you see it, and I will say that this is where the acting is superbly good, is that you can see it in his eyes, you can see that glimmer, quite literally, as he's like, even smirks a bit. You can hint it very, very subtly. It's really nice. And he persists to go into the kitchen, and all of the chefs are aside, and he's the only one doing it. And he's taking his sweet time, and he has that smile on his face and that smile finally returns as he's able to finally get back to making what made him initially happy was that one first cheeseburger, that first thing that, you made when you enjoyed doing the thing. So he's at his purest, happiest form right now, and it is delivered to her with fries. So she takes a bite out of it and says, yeah, that was a really good fucking cheeseburger. I'm paraphrasing a bit, but that's essentially what she says. And then she says something along the lines of, I misjudged this, it looks like too much. Can I take it to go? A really clever, I will admit, a really clever, when you go to a diner, that's something that, the restaurant people usually ask, they usually ask it upon you, will you take this to go? But she sort of takes that knowledge, like she already has that knowledge already sort of in her, I guess, or thinking of that as a attempt at an escape mechanism. And in short, she is allowed to be let go, and no one else even considers to attempt to do the same. Like, no one is like, hey, can I have that? And, trying to mimic her escape plan. It's like, guys, you were, especially the guy in yellow, it's like, if anyone was willing to copy, to mimic, and see her exit, and be allowed to exit, it's like, wouldn't that guy do it? It's like, what are you doing? why is this movie being inconsistent with the character all of a sudden? It's like, why? It doesn't make sense. Like, literally, no one else even tries to move. Everyone's resigned all of a sudden to be just like, oh, we give up. Whatever, we're all gonna die. And this is where he says, the final course, s'mores. The most over-packaged, disgusting, simple thing that America, something rather, thing that you can make. Of, like, disgrace to, like, the food industry or whatever. Something along these lines of, like, it's everything wrong with America, as he puts it, or whatever. I don't know. Anyway, as I explained, Margot escapes. She gets all the way to the boat, manages to, while the chefs are preparing their final course, as it were, as she gets out far enough on the boat, and then it stops, and then he persists to light the match, as everything was prepared on top of them, including marshmallows on top of their bodies, and they don't even struggle to get out. The chocolate cones on their heads, and none of them even try to do anything still, and they're all just, again, content with giving up at this point. All of them. Not even one. Not even the guy who's been consistently trying to escape this hell is like, nah, fuck it, I give up too. It's like, why bother? It's like, well, shit, why bother making characters consistent? Why not show him at least try to do it, and then, you know, at least show that that's a mistake, that they're not gonna let him get away. Show the chefs pull him back. Something, you know, to show that consistently, to make that the running gag even up until the end, to the very last breath of these individuals. And they light up Julian lights it up, and the chefs turn up all the heat to rise up the flames of to the establishment, as it were. And I've heard, again, when I've heard other people critique this, I've heard two reviews prior to this, and both of them focusing on how the third act is the weakest part of the movie. I would agree, however, I would add on that there are other elements even beforehand, like I said, from all the way back from Tyler's bullshit, that are wildly baffling choices, honestly, and I'm trying to think of even why that was thematically the way they decided to go about doing that specific thing, and I'm still confused, and I still don't know why they did that. So yeah, I think that this movie is a little bit more on the weaker end than on the solid end. This is where obviously it definitely feels like the theme of the movie, or like the overarching thing that they were trying to say on the movie to the audience, you know, what they're trying to say, I feel like that was pushed to the forefront, and the characters unfortunately came secondary, because a lot of the choices that the characters make don't necessarily even fit with what's going on all the time. It's a bit inconvenient, as it were, and it comes off as it leads to more confusion. It leads to the theme being a lot more muddled than I think a lot of people are willing to sadly overlook, and I'm not one to overlook things. I'm a critic, and as I said from the beginning, I'm here to look at movies as objectively as possible. So maybe I should have been that critic that was pulled up after all. See? Right? Because I'm willing to give this movie a much harsher score than what I've seen given to it, because I've seen most people give it like a really high score, which I find a little bit baffling. I'm gonna give this movie a middling review, like right in between, a 5 out of 10. I do see a lot of the beginning structure working up until like halfway through, where everything starts to break apart and where things are starting to get unveiled. And right as that bridge breaks, my suspension of disbelief breaks with it, and then things start to fall apart, like what the movie's even trying to say at this particular juncture with Tyler, and what his whole thing is, and the whole third act kind of falls apart, except for the small little snippets that Margot is doing that are smart. Everything else in that third act is stupid, is what I'm trying to get at. And I feel like there are very minor adjustments that you could have done to negate all of these issues, quite frankly. I do think that this was a lot of oversight on just really thinking through what each character would do in correspondent to the theme, instead of just saying like, oh, we'll just throw in anybody, like Tyler, for example. He's been enjoying the food, so we'll make him be the one to step up to the plate. Despite thematically, I don't understand why it would be Tyler at all still. And I'm pretty sure there will be people defending the pick of Tyler, and I probably still won't get it after their claims, because I'm pretty sure they'll have to make something up, because I genuinely don't know what the answer is. So yeah, I do feel like it's a rather ambitious movie, obviously, because the film and theme is very much like a reflection on the small versus the big corporations and the big group. And, sometimes that can sort of spill over into a oopsie or a mistake. So it's actually a lot closer to The Glass Onion, which is a movie that I reviewed not even that long ago. And I also thought that movie was shit. It's like, I don't know, movies have a hard time of explaining and having it fit their narrative of the lower class going against the higher class. It seems to be like certain directors and writers have a hard time pulling that off consistently. It's like the second time that's happened. So it's weird that if I had a quarter for every time that it's happened, it's weird that it's happened twice this quickly, if anything. But hey, I'd have 2 more quarters for shit. Or mediocrity at best. But I would say that out of the 2 movies that deal with similar themes, I would argue that The Menu is a bit better than Glass Onion. The Glass Onion is just way worse. Anyway, that is my full movie review. And if you ended up enjoying it, then please feel free to like, comment, and subscribe. Also, make sure to check out those links in the description. 1, head you over to my petition. 2nd and 3rd, to my Patreon and PayPal. And 4th, to my Discord server. Any and all donations are greatly appreciated. And until next time, everyone, bye-bye.